Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. Got to believe that the top two quarterbacks in the league now. Is Josh Allen in that category, or is he below that?
I mean, you can't base it all off of the last game,
No,
right?
you can't. You're right.
Because he had a great season overall, although I think there were games where he made mistakes. And I think there were games where just the Bills' offense didn't look really flashy at all. Like, I don't know how to explain the Bengals-Bills game this weekend other than the Bills just had no juice. Like, they had no run game. They had no flashes on offense. And I don't think it's all Josh Allen's fault because I think he's made those mistakes that people associate with him from especially his rookie year when he got into the league. But I still think he's up there with Burrow and Mahomes. I still think he's a really good like Mike said, I think he's still a tier A quarterback or tier 1, whichever you want to label it. But I think they definitely need to evaluate what went wrong in that game where it's your, biggest game of the season up to that point, and you can't produce anything on offense. You're supposed to have this incredible, high-powered, high-scoring offense in that game. And even in the Dolphins game, there was just not a lot going on there. So how do you fix that?
So Mike, let me ask you, though, when do you start separating? They do this in baseball all the time with postseason. If you're successful in postseason, you get ratcheted up a notch of what your value is. So Joe Burrow, basically the last 4 times he's played Buffalo and Kansas City, he's 4-0, in the playoffs. So he's getting it done in the playoffs. Josh Allen is not getting it done at this point in the playoffs. And I don't want to say team-wise, but I'm talking quarterback-wise. So when does that start hurting him enough to drop him down a notch from Mahomes and Burrow?
Well, I think it already has in some people's immediate reaction to this. At the same time, we go back to last year in the postseason. That Chiefs-Bills game is one of the best games we've seen in the last 5 years, and Josh was a god in that game. Josh was so good in that game, and we got such a lightning rod thing that Tony Romo's been able to coast off that big game Gabe Davis shit for God knows how long since then and convince us that he's the answer at number 2 for that team. So it's already affecting, and we're watching the thing happen now with Burrow where people are trying to jump him over Mahomes because of what's going on now. And while I don't agree with that, just because Mahomes has so many more physical gifts than Joe does, like Joe has overcome all those. He's got the moxie. He's a really good quarterback at understanding what's around him and how he's got to adjust his game, being down 3 starters in the O-line this last week and last season, both good examples of it. But it is interesting for Joe because he's in this first rookie contract, and a lot like Mahomes, you're going to see the potential for him to go Super Bowl appearance and Super Bowl win in back-to-back years while still on that rookie contract. Like, if he manages to pull that off and they were to win the Super Bowl this year, his early trajectory and Mahomes' early trajectory, despite, I think, the difference in physical ability, would be identical in when it comes to what they've done in the postseason. And to your point, early on, that's how we build mythology. It's why now I even struggle in my peanut brain to pick against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in this matchup where the Bengals are better at most meaningful things because Patrick Mahomes for so long was so money in every spot they needed when we're all watching the same 1 or 2 games on a postseason weekend.
Yeah, and I think just like how you can't necessarily judge Josh Allen on this postseason, like Joe Burrow's super wild card weekend performance against the Ravens, and granted they have a really good defense, it wasn't his best postseason game either. So I think like the single game evaluation thing that we tend to do when we react to these games is not always the best indication of someone's talent level, and you have to look over the course of the season. Over the course of the season, the Bengals have gotten better week to week because their O-line's played better. Joe Burrow has adjusted, like Gojo just said, with all the various injuries they've had to deal with. And I think I still place him in that top tier because I still think he's an elite, really good quarterback. But you can't knock Josh Allen just like you can't knock Joe Burrow from his variance week to week in this postseason.
Yeah, I called that Baltimore game. Baltimore had 4 sacks in that game, and they were pressuring the hell out of him. It's very true.
Yeah, I think a lot of this analysis, we sort of make opponent agnostic where we forget on the other side, like the Bills since Von Miller went down had been a bottom-tier quarterback pressure team in the NFL. And so even I overlooked that. I'm like, man, being down 3 starters on the O-line has to matter. It's like it's a snow game, and this team's already not good at pressuring people, so that's advantage offense in the way that they want to go about that. It's what makes the Kansas City matchup really interesting because Chris Jones, Frank Clark sometimes on the other side, and just overall Spag style of saying, I'm going to send bodies and try and flush the pipes on this. We've seen it bite them in the ass against Joe Burrow and these receivers, but it's a different challenge for the backups on the O-line than what they got out of Buffalo, who's just, going to put guys up sometimes, but more often than not, just rush 4.